Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program 2, where we are getting ready for our Hohmann transfer over to Julian orbit. And we want to hit this fairly accurately, if at all we can help it. That would be ideal. We're going to warp forward here. We've got a ways to warp, though. This is going to take a little while to get there. So let's get zoomed on out here. And we can see, yeah, it's going to be a little while to warp. No doubt about that. But I'm quite content with where this was. This is Elu. Hang on. We want to be focusing Jool here. And yeah, this is a pretty good position here. It's not perfect on the inclination, but it's pretty close. And it should definitely do the trick. Okay, so we are approaching our burn point here, and we are about 4 hours away. We're going to warp a little bit further here. There we go. Now we're about 3 minutes away. 2 minutes, 1 minute, and let's just bring this back a little bit. Okay, let's allow ourselves to angle for these last couple seconds here. I think we're pretty close to being on the burn point, but of course, this is where we want to be, and we want to be here relatively accurately. So 545 meters per second to get here. Okay. Keep in mind, if we need it, assuming we can get back into orbit, if we need it, we do have a Clampatron here. We can send a rescue mission and refuel this if we have to. But we shouldn't have to, in theory. Hang on, we're supposed to be burning. It probably isn't that big of a deal that I missed that burn start. It's not going to change things too much. We're in a very, very large orbit, so this is going to be a very, very minor thing. We'll just continue this burn for, well, the entire duration of it. This is not going to be accurate because I started it slightly late. It's okay. We just want to bring ourselves in to where we are about here. Just encapsulating the orbit of Laythe. That is our goal. So this is obviously not a correct timing. Let's just get this burn finished up here and... Okay. Overshot it ever so slightly. Let's bring this around to retrograde. While we're turning, I'm going to turn off these engines. So this is going to single-handedly bring us down to 20% thrust. I'm also going to thrust limit this guy down to a further 20%. So that is going to be a significant thrust reduction. So that sounds good. Now we need to make our way back over to Jool. And we just need to widen out this orbit a little bit. It doesn't have to be much. So we're just positioning ourselves at retrograde here. There we go. And let's just bring this out. I do not want to have an encounter on the way in. This should be good. In theory. Yes, this looks fine. So we'll just encapsulate the orbit here, and then we'll have to do a transfer over to Laythe, of course. It would be ideal if this was timed to where when we were here, Laythe was here, and we don't have to do a circularization and transfer, we just do a braking burn, but that's obviously not the way that this is set up. So that is absolutely fine for now. We're going to want to warp to about here, which is going to be our entry into the Julian system. And of course, this is a pretty hyperbolic orbit, but it's fine. So, onward we warp, and it's going to take a little while to get there for sure. This is also relatively close to our periapsis. Indeed. Okay, well, that's mildly awkward, but sure. Why would that be our periapsis? Hang on, that doesn't make sense. Oh, this is because we're going to get flung out. Right, this is showing our next apoapsis because we're gravity assisting around Jool right now. Yeah, that does make sense. Never mind. Okay, so we are in the Julian sphere of influence now, I believe, and we are going to come to this periapsis. Are we not in this yet? I'm not able to interact with this. Let's warp forward a little bit. Are we exiting this? Okay, no. It just looked really, really strange. We were entering it here. I was like, hang on, that makes no sense whatsoever. But we were going this direction towards the entrance, which was here. It was really, really weird. But, I guess it makes sense, now that I think about it. Okay, sure. We're going to create a maneuver plan here. This is, of course, going to be a retrograde burn, and it's not all that much DV, which we knew that that would be the case. It's 1200 DV. The question is, if we set Laythe as our target, well, we probably don't even want to do that, right? Probably not. We're going to be in a pretty equatorial orbit here. So that is definitely somewhat concerning. Let's just circularize this about like that, about 1100 meters per second. And we can align for that burn. But this is going to be very, very interesting. We're going to need to get into an orbital, or rather a polar orbit of Laythe, because we know that our target point is here. So a polar orbit of Laythe is definitely the way to go. Is Laythe tidally locked? I don't know. Either way, a polar orbit should be the way to go. So we'd like to be in a polar orbit that is like out over here, because the sun's position will shift based on the time of year of the Julian orbit. And that is definitely something that we need to consider. So we're going to... Whoa, that is not pleasant. Let's not do that. Let's focus on Jool, thanks. Okay, there we go. This is much more pleasant. Perfect. So we're just going to bring this on in. We're about 4 hours away from this burn now, and we'll warp in a little closer. We're now about 3 minutes away from the burn. And we'll just accelerate that a little bit. 2 minutes. 1 minute, 30 seconds, 20, 10, and 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. Okay, braking burn is engaged, except I just realized, yeah, this is still a thing here. Let's bring this up a bit, and I'm also going to activate all of these engines. So activate you and activate you. There we go. Now we're going to burn this full thrust. Okay, that's a little bit more like it. Again, we're a little late on it, but it doesn't matter. This is completely fine. So we're going to bring our apoapsis right on down and just circularize this outside, or circularize-ish, outside of Laythe's orbit. And then are we even going to do an inclination change? I don't know. I'm thinking about not doing an inclination change here. Because we know we're going to need to get into a polar orbit anyway, right? So we may just want to find an encounter and bake our inclination change into the Hohmann transfer. That's probably what we want to end up doing here. So let's just bring this apoapsis on down a little bit further. We've got lots and lots of DV left. I'm not sure how much braking burn we're going to have to do for our landing. I think it'll be some. We'll see what our... Well, it's going to be interesting, for sure. We'll see what our parachutes end up being. I have no idea how I'm going to do this. This is going to be very interesting. Well, we'll get there. This is not a this moment thing to tackle, so that is fine. We're just bringing this apoapsis right on down. We've got a little bit left to do here, and we'll just bring it around like so. This is good enough. So that is fine. Next, of course, we're going to be Hohmann transferring over to Laythe, and the question is, what will that look like? Well, not that. I can tell you that. So we're looking for timings here. That's a Laythe encounter. And it's a halfway decent one, it looks like. Actually, that is halfway decent. I want to tweak it a little bit to get ourselves into that kind of polar orbit. Other way here. Okay. So yeah, something along the lines of this. And the Laythe periapsis is a bit on the low side here. We're going to have to get a little bit of, I think, prograde here. No, this is retrograde. Okay, so we'll push out that periapsis a bit, and just messing with this a little bit here. I want it to be, yeah, about there or so, and then come in over here. That backed us off on this direction a little bit, so that is understood. Yeah, that orbit is definitely not really improving, and we're tossing a lot more DV at it. Okay. This is basically on the Terminator, or very close to it. This is not exactly the inclination that I want. The inclination that I want is not closer to this. Let's see what a radial burn would do a little bit here, if we tossed in slight radial. And backed off on a fair amount of the inclination change. A little bit here. Yeah, I don't love it. To be honest, I think our best bet would be to come in about like this, circularize out here, and then go to whatever inclination we're looking at. Like, realistically, we're going to want to burn somewhere up over here and, like, twist our orbit around a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of this marker here, and we are going to do this a little bit more fuel economically. If we have to make that change anyway, then we might as well bring this out. Hang on, in. Yeah, this direction. And that is an impact trajectory. Let's pull that back a little bit and park it somewhere around here. Now, this is not necessarily a great inclination, but it's okay. We can work with it. That'll work for now. 254 meters per second. It'll do. So we're going to align for that burn, and that'll be in about a day. That's probably a fairly accurate amount of time that'll be, if I had to guess. So that's absolutely fine. Let's get aligned for this burn. At that point, it will be a pure retrograde burn, since we're not doing anything fancy at this moment. Then we're going to do a braking burn, then an inclination change, then we're going to drop our altitude quite a lot lower. And then we're going to go in for our landing. So we've got a number of steps yet here. So let's warp on forward to that encounter point. We're now about 3 minutes away from it. Okay, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, 20, 10, and 3, 2, 1, mark. Okay, 254 meters per second. Putting us into our encounter very shortly here. This is not the encounter that I want. I don't know if this is retrograde or not. It might be. It probably doesn't matter, though. So we'll just put this right about here. Okay, that'll work. So now we need to head over to our encounter with Laythe. So that would mean warping to about here. It'll automatically pull us out of warp just before we enter the celestial body in theory, but it didn't actually work. So we could check to see if we're retrograde or not. For now, I'm just going to get ourselves actually into orbit. We can circularize this, I guess. And what's the overall inclination here? Yeah, this is definitely not the inclination we want. We want to be down here on this side, right? So we can see right now, this is on the dark side. I still don't know what this is going to end up looking like in terms of where we're going to be landing. We've not seen it on the day side just yet. Let's align for that burn for now, and I want to check to see what directionality Laythe is going on the way in. So, we're coming this direction. Is Laythe orbiting this way or this way? We'll have to find out. We're still working on getting oriented here, but this will drop us like 2 to 3 minutes before, and we'll be able to figure it out. So let's just warp here. Laythe is going this direction, so we're prograde. Okay, beautiful. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, so this dropped us about 40 seconds away from the marker. We've still got some traversal to do. So we don't need to flip our directionality. That is good to know. However, I am absolutely going to want to change our inclination here. No doubt about that. And we'll want to drop down to a much lower apoapsis and periapsis later. Cool. So we've got about 30 seconds now. Let's warp forward a little bit. 20, 10, and 5, 4, 3. There we go. 2, 1, and mark. A couple of those were extremely long seconds, but whatever. Cool. So just drop ourselves down here. Orbital maneuvers over Laythe are not going to take that much DV. So that should be pretty decent. Okay, this'll do as far as the circularization goes. Now, what I want to do is I want to line up with the Terminator here. And I want to create a maneuver plan here, bringing this guy right on down. That's a fair amount of DV. Okay, noted. But it'll end up being something kind of like this, maybe even slightly lower than that, but we can retrograde it in and bring our periapsis down to a much lower number. So that would be something... This is a little too much on the shifting here. Definitely too much. Let's back off on the normal burn a little bit. Okay. So it ends up being something a little bit like this. That's 84 kilometers, which is, I think, a little too high for Laythe. I think the Laythe atmosphere starts at 50, but I don't know that for an absolute fact. We should also run researches if we can. I think it starts at 50. Yes, I know Laythe is a celestial body. Let's see here. Is there a way to see that in KSP2? I feel like there is, but I'm 99% sure it starts at like 50. Kerbal starts at 70. I don't think it's higher than that. Let me look it up, though. Laythe atmosphere height. What do we got? Atmospheric pressure starts at 50 kilometers, according to the KSP wiki. Now, that might be KSP 1. It's probably unchanged for KSP 2. So 50 kilometers means that we would want to dial this in a little bit and put this right at about 60 kilometers or so. So that's now going to have to be something like this. I guess 55 kilometers is probably okay. And how are we feeling about that inclination? This is going to rotate around and be about here. Yeah, that seems relatively fine. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm certainly a little concerned right now about our DV amount, but we'll see what that ends up looking like. We're going to have to circularize at this periapsis. This maneuver is a little higher on the DV than I had figured, but I think we'll be okay. Question is, once we get going, well, the real question is, how much is the Laythe atmosphere going to save us in terms of DV, right? And how much is it going to cost us on the other side? Well, we'll find out. So for now, we're going to warp forward to that. That'll be okay. Let's focus the camera on Laythe for the moment. And the location that we are looking to land on is always perpetually cloaked in shadow every time I look. We'll get there. So that's fine for now. We've got about 40 seconds here. So let's warp forward a little bit. 30, 20, 10, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. Okay. So the real question is, once we ditch these side tanks, what is our thrust to weight going to look like on the surface of Laythe? That's an important question to ask. Another important question, of course, is how close can we get to this thing? And is it on land? Do we have to swim? If we have to swim, problems could ensue. We'll see. For now, I do want to warp through this burn a little bit. And yes, this is currently a impact trajectory, but that'll get fixed. Okay. And we're just angling to be right about here. 60 kilometers. That'll do. So next up, we're going to come over to here, and we're just going to bring this guy right on down to circularize. So that's about another 450 meters per second. Actually, closer to 500 meters per second. Noted. Our orbital velocity is currently reasonable. So I'm not too concerned about that, although what's it going to be? We're at our apoapsis right now. What's it going to be at the periapsis? Let's find out. Do we want to send a refueling mission right now? We know our thrust to weight is going to be low when this is fully fueled. And also, we need to be angling for this. We're about 40 seconds away. So 2,300, 2,400 meters per second, but it's going to be minus 500. Noted. Okay. The real question is one of DV on specifically, or rather not DV, thrust to weight on just this engine. We can definitely move some of this fuel out over here if we need to, though. So that seems reasonably fine. Now, this is not quite in view yet, but it'll be there very shortly. We've got about 14 seconds left until this burn begins. Okay. So that all seems reasonably fine. We should have enough to make it into Laythe orbit, and if we can do that, we'll get home. The real question is, how much will it take to decelerate us? But I don't think it'll be too bad. So we're commencing this burn. And then we'll just have to get this landing relatively close, right? That will be complicated. That will be very complicated. Okay, so we're dropping this on down. We've got about 10 seconds of burn time left. Six, 5, 4, 3. Yeah, we're very close here. And we're just going to get this nice and circularized. This is not exactly circularized. I'm actually going to push this a little further here because I want the periapsis to be out on this side and not quite in the atmosphere. That looks decent. So 1,800 meters per second. Noted. Well, it is about time to put a cut in here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And next episode, we are going to see what this ends up looking like for the landing. I'm a little concerned about getting this. We're going to have to land on land, and we're going to have to land on, ideally, reasonably flat land. But we're definitely going to want to move some of this fuel down and utilize our parachutes to their maximum effectiveness. It'll be very interesting. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Andy McGar, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Tommy Kentogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.